Hi, I'm Walter Koroshetz. I'm the director of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, and it's a pleasure to be here hosting the Pink Concussions Understanding Traumatic Brain Injury in Women Conference. So I've had multiple different stages in my career, from basic science to medical science. So I guess in the area of concussion, I ran the neurointensive care unit at the Mass General Hospital for about 10 years. So took care of some very severe head injuries. And also in my practice had a number of young folks who had been suffering from post-concussive syndrome. So it's been something that's close to my career for a long time. As a director of an institute at NIH, one's responsible for looking at the gaps in science, and clearly it was pretty evident there are many gaps, but one of them was a lack of knowledge about the differences in how traumatic brain injury affects men and women. So I think it was looking at the landscape and seeing this gap that got me first interested in trying to do something about that. In my practice, I was taking care of mostly patients with moderate severe head injury who came in, serious falls, and sex and gender was not on the top of the list. It was trying to get people through that critical period and out of the intensive care unit. So I didn't really have an appreciation for the differences in how the injury affects men and women at that point in time. But it came after coming here and seeing the breadth of research and seeing that this was a gap. It's across the board at NIH, there's been increased emphasis placed on looking at sex as a biological variable in all sorts of research that we do. So I'm at the Neurologic Institute, and most of the neurologic conditions we have affect men and women differently. And so it's really important to try and understand those differences for a couple of reasons. One is because it's necessary to understand how to treat people, because men and women are different. But second of all, because it may give us some real insights into the pathology of the disease. And so in some areas, women are affected more than men, sometimes the other way around. Understanding why it is might actually help. At NINDS, it's very common that where we see areas that we consider gaps in scientific knowledge, that we look for partners to build the kind of community discussion around those gaps and how to fill them. And so we were really enthusiastic to work with Pink Concussions to put this workshop together because it brings people from all different walks of life, all different scientific and even people who've experienced concussion together to kind of discuss this issue and understand how to fill the gaps. I love all the speakers here. I think are really superb, and we were very grateful that they came. I think Margaret McCarthy gave a keynote which really kind of, I think, hit all the high points, and I think is going to be very instructive for all the speakers who follow to try and get kind of everybody marching to the same beat and understanding these sex differences. The problems that we're talking about today are not going to be so easy to solve, particularly when it comes to concussion. We're in a situation where we know that circuits in the brain are not functioning normally. When someone has a concussion, oftentimes they're unconscious. It's the biggest change you can imagine, going from a functioning high-level brain to unconscious. But then there's that coming out of unconsciousness and moving to coming back to normal again. How that actually happens is really hard to understand. And we don't have the ability to actually see inside the brain and see what's actually happening in that period of time. Therefore, we don't really understand how to know when the brain is fully recovered or not, or what to do to help it fully recover. So the tools we have to understand mild, we'll call mild, some people it's not so mild, but concussion are really limiting us, and we really need new tools. We work now, I say there's one really interesting program that's going on at NIH. It's called the Brain Initiative, And the Brain Initiative is trying to develop tools that will allow us to monitor and modulate circuit activity. And those tools have been coming out now at a spectacular rate, particularly with regard to doing animal studies. So I think we have the ability to do things in animal studies now to understand concussion we never had before. But trying to get those tools, and when people are trying to get those tools to apply to the living person, if we can do that and see brain circuit activity and how it's been affected in concussion, what determines what's a good response, what's not such a good response, I think that'll guide us towards better therapies. Well, concussion is extremely common. I think almost everybody at some time has hit their head in a way that changed their function, if only for a short period of time. My concussion story was riding my bike down a hill, and 4 deer jumped in front of my bike, missed the deer, but I was out for at least 30 seconds or so. It took, a day or so to get better, but it brought home exactly what it means to have a concussion.